The Young and the Restless spoilers Monday full episodes November 3, 2025. The night settled over Genoa City with a quiet heaviness, as though the town itself was holding its breath. The Halloween decorations still lingered on the streets, their cheerful lights now dim and eerie beneath the drizzle that began to fall. At the Abbott estate, laughter had faded into memory, replaced by the calm after celebration, the echo of joy shadowed by reflection. For Kyle Abbott, the evening had been about more than costumes and candy. It was about holding on to something pure amid the chaos that had overtaken so many corners of his life. He and his young son Harrison had returned home still glowing with the aftermath of the neighborhood party, their matching costumes, one house made of straw, the other of brick, marking a rare moment of simplicity in a world often poisoned by secrets and loss. Harrison's laughter filled the foyer as he proudly lifted the small trophy he had won, his eyes glimmering as he told his father that they had taken first place. Kyle smiled, genuine and soft, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. But when Harrison's tone shifted, a quiet sadness in his voice as he noted that the house made of sticks hadn't been able to join them, the child's innocent comment struck deep. That third house, that missing piece of their little trio, was more than a costume. It was the absence of Claire, and both father and son felt the void without saying her name. Kyle crouched to meet Harrison's eyes, promising that someday they'd all be together again, even though part of him knew promises like that had long stopped holding any guarantee in Genoa City. He told his son to help him greet the last trick-or-treaters before bedtime. The doorbell rang again, a chorus of tiny voices shouting for candy. Kyle handed out handfuls of chocolates, laughing softly at their excitement. When the children ran off into the fog, he stepped back inside, shaking the chill from his hands. He turned to find Harrison studying the candy bowl, his brow furrowed in thought. Kyle asked what was wrong, and Harrison pointed to the bottom of the bowl, where several chocolate bars had been carefully set aside. They were Claire's favorites. The air thickened with memory. Kyle froze for a moment, then knelt again, smiling faintly but unable to disguise the ache in his eyes. Harrison's small voice cut through the silence. "You miss her, don't you?" Kyle exhaled slowly, admitting that he did, more than he could explain. Harrison nodded quietly, then confessed he missed his mother too. In that small exchange between father and son lay an ocean of grief, love, and longing, a tender reminder that even the youngest hearts in Genoa City carried their share of sorrow. Meanwhile, across town, a far darker storm was gathering. Sharon Newman stood alone beneath the harsh glow of the hospital corridor lights, her reflection fractured in the glass of Noah's door. The faint rhythm of machines beyond the glass pulsed like a heartbeat tethered to her own fear. Nick's words still echoed in her mind, his quiet assurance that they would get answers soon, that justice would come. But to Sharon, soon wasn't good enough. Her son's attack wasn't some abstract mystery, it was a wound that bled through her every thought. When she had asked Nick when, her voice trembling with exhaustion and fury, he had told her to rest. He had said he'd call her if there were any changes. He had meant well, he always did, but Sharon had spent too many years watching the people she loved vanish in the spaces between good intentions. As she left the hospital, her steps were steady but her eyes burned with resolve. She wasn't going to sleep. She wasn't going to wait. She was going to find the truth herself. Nick had seen the exhaustion in her face and tried to persuade her otherwise. He had placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and urged her to go back to the hotel, to lie down for just a few hours. "You can't pour from an empty cup," he had said, his voice firm but tender. But Sharon wasn't empty. She was overflowing, with rage, grief, and the raw instinct of a mother who refused to be sidelined. Once Nick had turned back toward Noah's room, she walked down the hall without a word, the soft click of her heels echoing through the emptiness. At the nurse's station, she quietly asked for directions to the hospital's public computers. Within minutes, she had found what she was looking for, an address connected to the elusive name that had haunted every lead, the Shadow Room. It wasn't a clinic, nor an office. It was an underground club, rumored to be a place where deals were made in whispers and debts were settled in blood. Sharon scribbled down the address, her hands trembling slightly, and slipped the note into her purse. If Sienna Bacall was there, Sharon was going to confront her, and this time, she wasn't leaving without answers. Back at the hospital, Nick stared at the sleeping figure of his son, his mind a labyrinth of fear and guilt. He wanted to believe Sharon would listen to reason, that she would rest, but something inside him knew she wouldn't. The same fire that once drew him to her was now leading her straight into danger. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to convince himself that he could handle both, guarding Noah and keeping Sharon safe. But the truth was slipping away faster than he could contain it. When the door creaked behind him, Nick turned sharply, expecting a nurse, and froze. The man standing in the doorway wasn't hospital staff. His presence was too deliberate, his eyes too familiar. Matt Clark, Nick muttered under his breath, every muscle in his body tensing. The ghost of the past had returned in the flesh. Matt's smirk was the same as it had always been, charming and venomous in equal measure. He said he had come to offer his condolences. Nick saw through the lie instantly. Matt didn't come to comfort, he came to provoke. Their history was a catalogue of violence and betrayal, and just the sight of him ignited every instinct Nick had fought to bury. Sharon didn't know Matt was back in Genoa City, and if she did, she'd never forgive Nick for not warning her. Matt leaned casually against the doorframe, pretending to study Noah's chart, his tone laced with mock concern as he commented on how fragile life could be. Nick moved toward him, his fists tightening, warning him to stay away from his family. But Matt only grinned, his voice dripping with arrogance as he said he'd already seen Sharon. That name, spoken so casually, so possessively, set off alarms in Nick's head. He didn't believe it at first, but the confidence in Matt's tone made his blood run cold. Sharon was out there, alone, chasing ghosts, and she might have just walked straight into Matt Clark's orbit. Outside, the rain had turned into a downpour, the streets shimmering with reflections of neon lights and secrets. Sharon parked near the shadow room, her heart pounding as she looked up at the old brick building. She could hear the faint hum of music beneath the sound of rain, and her breath came shallow. She wasn't afraid, not yet, but something about the place felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. Inside, laughter mixed with tension. Shadows moved in corners, conversations stopped when she entered. She asked the bartender for Sienna Bacall, her voice steady despite the pulse racing in her throat. The man hesitated, then nodded toward the back. But before Sharon could move, a familiar voice drifted from behind her, smooth, low, unmistakable. "Looking for someone?" She turned, and her eyes widened. Matt Clark stood there, his smile dark and knowing, the years having only sharpened his danger. For a second, Sharon couldn't breathe. The past she thought she'd buried had just stepped into the room. Back at the Abbott mansion, Kyle watched Harrison sleeping on the couch, a soft blanket tucked around him, the child's small hand clutching the trophy they had won. The innocence of that image, so fragile, so pure, reminded Kyle why he fought so hard. But his mind was restless. He walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked night, wondering what choices he could make to protect his son from the same legacy of pain that had shaped every Abbott before him. He thought of Jack, of Diane, of all the broken promises that had built the foundation of their family. He vowed to do better, to be the kind of father Harrison deserved. Yet even as he made that silent promise, a flicker of unease gnawed at him. The phone on the table buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared, "She's not gone. She's closer than you think." Kyle's breath caught. He looked back at Harrison, then at the message again. "Claire." In that same moment, miles away, Nick raced through the rain, his car cutting through the empty streets toward the shadow room. He had called Sharon's hotel, no answer. He had called her phone, straight to voicemail. The dread in his chest grew heavier with every passing second. He knew Sharon's courage, he also knew her recklessness. And now, with Matt Clark in the picture, that combination could be fatal. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, whispering a silent plea that he wouldn't be too late this time. Inside the shadow room, Sharon's confrontation with Matt had turned into a dangerous game of words. He circled her slowly, mocking her questions, feeding her half-truths about Noah's attack. He hinted that Sienna Bacall wasn't the one she should be looking for, that the real enemy was closer to home. Sharon's mind raced. Matt's words were a trap, but part of her couldn't ignore the flicker of recognition in his tone, the implication that he knew more about the Newman family than anyone should. She pressed him for details, demanding to know what he wanted. Matt only smiled, his eyes glinting under the dim light. "I want what I've always wanted," he said. "To finish what I started." And as lightning flashed outside, Nick burst through the door, his eyes scanning the crowded room until they landed on Sharon, standing face to face with the man who had once nearly destroyed both their lives. The next morning, the Abbott mansion was bathed in soft light, filtered through the rain-washed windows, the calm after the night's storm. Kyle sat at the kitchen table with a steaming mug of coffee, his phone resting beside him as Harrison climbed onto the chair across from him, clutching the small Halloween trophy like it was a treasure. The boy's smile was bright, his energy infectious, and for a few minutes, Kyle allowed himself to believe that everything was normal. They had spent the morning laughing over leftover candy, the wrappers scattered like confetti between them. Harrison's curiosity soon shifted from the chocolate bars to his father's phone. "Did you send the picture?" he asked, his voice eager and full of hope. Kyle smiled and nodded, showing him the image, the two of them dressed in their matching costumes, grinning beneath the paper pig noses. He had already sent the photo to both Claire and Summer, attaching a simple message, "We missed you tonight." He hadn't expected an instant reply, but he couldn't deny that a small part of him hoped Claire would respond quickly, that she would see the picture and feel the tug of home. Harrison leaned forward, his small fingers tapping at the screen as if willing it to light up. "Did she see it yet?" he asked again. Kyle looked at his phone, the status still read delivered, but not read. He hesitated before answering. "Not yet, buddy," he said softly. "Maybe she's busy." Harrison frowned, his lower lip trembling slightly. "I hope she didn't run into the big bad wolf in Los Angeles," he muttered, half teasing, half serious. Kyle couldn't help but smile at the innocence in his son's voice, but his heart ached all the same. He reached across the table and ruffled the boy's hair. "Claire's smart," he said. "She knows how to take care of herself." But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. Far away in Los Angeles, Claire Grace was doing her best to convince herself of the same thing. The night air was warmer there, thick with music and the glow of neon lights. The Shadow Room, once a name whispered in fear and secrecy, had transformed for Halloween into a glamorous haven of masks, laughter, and temptation. Inside, the pulse of the crowd matched the rhythm of her heartbeat as she tried to lose herself in the moment. Holden stood beside her at the bar, his easy charm disarming her defenses one smile at a time. He wasn't like the men she had known in Genoa City, his confidence was quiet, his interest genuine, or at least it seemed that way. When he offered to leave the party if she wasn't comfortable, his tone was protective, not possessive. But Claire shook her head, meeting his eyes with quiet resolve. "I want to be here," she said, her voice barely audible over the music. "With you." For a moment, the noise of the room faded. Holden smiled and raised his glass, and Claire followed suit, her hesitation dissolving into a fragile kind of freedom. The clink of their glasses sounded like a promise neither of them was ready to define. But somewhere in the dim light, a pair of watchful eyes followed their every move. Sienna Bacall sat at the edge of the bar, her posture elegant and calculated, her gaze cold and deliberate. The woman had a way of blending into the background while commanding attention, a predator in designer heels. Her drink remained untouched as she studied Claire's laughter, her interactions, her comfort in Holden's presence. There was something dangerous about the ease between them, something that Sienna couldn't allow to continue unchecked. When the moment presented itself, she moved. Her approach was smooth, her voice low and controlled as she interrupted their conversation with a polite but pointed request. "Holden," she said, "we need to talk, alone." Claire blinked, surprised by the sudden tension in Holden's expression. He hesitated before nodding, excusing himself gently. As he followed Sienna toward the back corner of the room, Claire watched them go, her heart tightening with confusion. She didn't know Sienna well, only through whispers, through stories that linked her name to both danger and elegance. The way Holden's shoulders tensed told her that this wasn't a friendly exchange. In the quiet corner of the shadow room, Sienna turned to face Holden, her eyes sharp. She wasted no time. "Kyle Abbott was here," she said flatly. Holden's brow furrowed, irritation flickering across his face. "What?" She nodded. "He came asking questions, about you, about Audra Charles. He doesn't trust you." Holden exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "That guy doesn't know when to quit," he muttered. "He thinks everyone's a threat." Sienna didn't smile. "He's not entirely wrong to worry," she said, her tone laced with meaning. Holden's eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" She met his gaze without flinching. "That he's afraid you'll hurt Claire." "And honestly, Holden, are you sure he's wrong?" Holden stiffened, his jaw tightening. "I'd never hurt her," he said quietly. "Not her." Sienna studied him for a long moment, searching for cracks in his conviction. She didn't find any, and that unsettled her more than if he had lied. "Then prove it," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "Stay out of whatever's coming." Without another word, she turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Holden alone with his thoughts and the weight of secrets he hadn't yet confessed. Back at the bar, Claire fidgeted with her drink, her mind a swirl of unease. When Holden returned, his smile was forced, his voice steady but thinner than before. She asked what Sienna wanted, but he only said it was business, nothing for her to worry about. Still, Claire could feel the shift in the air. Her instincts, the same ones that had saved her from more than one dangerous situation, told her something was off. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement at the entrance. Her breath caught. Sharon Newman stood there, scanning the room with a mixture of determination and worry that could only come from a mother on a mission. The crowd seemed to blur around her as Sharon's eyes locked onto Sienna at the far end of the room. The distance between them felt charged, magnetic, two women bound by truths neither fully understood. Claire's pulse quickened. She stepped forward, calling out softly, her voice barely audible above the music. "Sharon? What are you doing here?" Sharon turned, surprise flashing across her face at the sight of the young woman she had once taken under her wing. For a brief moment, the tension softened, replaced by genuine concern. "I'm looking for Sienna," Sharon said, her tone clipped but kind. "I need to speak with her." Claire's voice faltered as she tried to respond. "Sienna? I think she just left the bar area," she said, glancing toward the crowd where the woman had vanished. "Maybe I can help you find her." But Sharon shook her head, her expression calm but resolute. "No," she said softly. "I'll find her myself." The words carried a weight that made Claire's chest tighten. There was something in Sharon's eyes, a mix of maternal instinct and quiet fury, that told Claire this wasn't a simple conversation. This was personal, dangerous even. As Sharon moved deeper into the crowd, Holden returned to Claire's side, sensing her unease. "What's going on?" he asked, but she didn't answer. Her gaze followed Sharon's retreating figure, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't yet form. Was this about Noah? About the shadow room? Or about something darker still? The name Sienna Bacall had become a thread woven through too many lives, Noah, Mitch, Sharon, even Kyle, and now it was tightening around Claire too. Back in Genoa City, Kyle watched his phone again, hoping for a sign, a message, a response, anything. But there was still nothing. Harrison had fallen asleep on the couch, his small hand resting near the phone as if waiting for it to buzz. Kyle pulled a blanket over him, then stepped quietly into the hall. His thoughts drifted to Claire, to Los Angeles, to everything left unsaid between them. He didn't know that at that exact moment, Claire's world was shifting again, that Sharon's arrival at the Shadow Room would set off a chain of events that none of them could undo. Inside that dimly lit club, Sharon finally found Sienna near the back exit. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, decades of history, guilt, and unfinished business came roaring to the surface. Sienna's expression was calm, almost expectant, as though she had known this confrontation was inevitable. Sharon stopped a few feet away, her hands trembling slightly but her voice unwavering. "We need to talk," she said. Sienna's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Yes," she replied. "We do." And as the door to the alleyway swung open and the cold Los Angeles air rushed in, the two women stepped into the darkness, unaware that Kyle's unanswered message, Harrison's innocent hope, and Claire's silent fear were all about to collide in a storm that would stretch from Genoa City to the edge of the Pacific.